March 15, 1944. Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Ada Communications Unit, Japan. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara studied the intercepted transmission as his third cup of bitter tea cooled on his desk. For the past 18 hours, he and his team, Japan's finest cryptographic analysts, had been trying to decode what appeared to be tactical communications from the United States Marine Corps, originating from the Marshall Islands operation. The sounds coming through their receivers defied every analytic technique in their arsenal. Besetti da Descartes. These were not random noises. The pattern suggested structured military communication, timed sequences preceding American attacks, durations consistent with operational orders, and frequencies aligned with Marine Corps protocols. Yet the language itself remained impenetrable, unlike anything in their extensive archives on Allied communication systems. Kurihara commanded one of the most advanced signal intelligence operations in the world. The Ayada facility, located 20 miles outside Tokyo, employed 500 personnel operating 118 radio receivers and 20 direction-finding stations. His cryptanalytic teams had broken American diplomatic traffic, British naval communications, and multiple Army ciphers. They had even penetrated the Purple Code of the U.S. State Department before Pearl Harbor, providing Japan with crucial intelligence in the early years of the war. But these naval transmissions represented a complete cryptographic failure. 3 years into the war, after breaking dozens of Allied codes, Japan's brightest minds could not unravel even the basic patterns of these mysterious messages. What Kurihara did not know, what no Japanese intelligence officer would understand until long after the war, was that he was listening to the only unbroken code in modern military history. The story did not begin in the Pacific, but in the American Southwest, where for centuries the Navajo people had preserved a language unique in the world. Diné Bizad, the Navajo language, belongs to the Athabascan family and had roughly 170,000 speakers in 1940, nearly all confined to the 27,000 square-mile reservation spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The linguistic features that would baffle Japanese codebreakers had evolved over millennia. Navajo is fundamentally a verb-centered language, with actions described through complex combinations of prefixes that can number in the millions. The language uses 4 distinct tones: high, low, rising, and falling, that completely change word meanings. A slight mispronunciation doesn't just alter a word, it can render an entire phrase incomprehensible. Its phonology includes sounds absent in Japanese, English, and most world languages. Ejective consonants, where air explodes from the glottis. A voiceless lateral fricative that sounds like wind between the teeth. Glottalized sonorants, and nasalized vowels. For Japanese linguists trained in a language with only 5 vowel sounds, perceiving these phonemes accurately was nearly impossible. Philip Johnston recognized the military potential of this linguistic fortress. Born in 1892 to Protestant missionaries on the Navajo Reservation, Johnston grew up fluent in Navajo, one of fewer than 30 non-Navajos in the world who could claim that distinction. By age 9, he was translating his father's sermons. At 15, he traveled to Washington to interpret for Navajo leaders and met President Theodore Roosevelt. In December 1941, as America reeled from Pearl Harbor, Johnston read about Army units using Comanche speakers during training exercises in Louisiana. The Choctaw had served as informal code talkers in World War I, but those efforts were improvised and limited. Johnston envisioned something revolutionary, a formal military code based on the Navajo language, one both unbreakable and practical for modern warfare. On February 28, 1942, Johnston presented his proposal to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott, near San Diego. The demonstration was extraordinary. 4 Navajos from Los Angeles transmitted messages while Marine officers timed the process using standard procedures. The Navajo speakers completed their message in 20 seconds, compared to the 30 minutes required by the M209 encryption machine. Impressed, General Vogel authorized a pilot program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits took the oath at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. Among them were Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Benally, drawn from across the vast reservation. Some had attended boarding schools where speaking Navajo was forbidden and punished. Others were traditional shepherds who had rarely left their ancestral lands. At Camp Elliott, they worked for 8 weeks in a closed, guarded building, creating a military code in their native language. The task was monumental, developing terminology for concepts that did not exist in Navajo, building an alphabet system, ensuring memorability, and allowing for future expansion. They built the code through cultural logic. A submarine became a beshlo, or ironfish, swimming beneath the surface. A battleship was a lo-tso, a whale, the largest creature in the ocean. Fighter planes were da-hiti-hai, hummingbirds darting through the sky. Bombers were jay-sho, buzzards circling before descending. Creating the alphabet required special creativity. Each English letter received several Navajo words to avoid frequency analysis. The letter E, the most common in English, had 4 alternatives. Z, for example, was represented by zinni, elk, ah-ni, I cry, dazeh, deer, and ah-tsid, ear. Code talkers randomly alternated between these, destroying any detectable pattern. They developed 201 initial terms, memorizing every one perfectly. No written codebooks could risk capture. Chester Nez later recalled, "We practiced endlessly. One mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words have power. To speak correctly was sacred." The first test of the code took place in the Guadalcanal campaign in August 1942. 15 code talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division. The Japanese already expected the invasion, having broken other Allied codes, but suddenly Marine tactical messages became incomprehensible. At the 8th Japanese Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers struggled to make sense of the transmissions. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, educated at Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like a language with consistent patterns, but they correspond to nothing. Neither English, nor French, nor Dutch, nor Spanish, nor any Filipino or Chinese dialect. Completely unknown." The Japanese response was methodical. They assigned their best cryptanalysts, recorded hundreds of hours on wax cylinders, and applied every known analytical method. They consulted university linguists, even Buddhist monks who studied ancient languages. Nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, code talker Chester Nez transmitted artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest. The 14-second message was intercepted, but to Japanese operators, it was meaningless. Within minutes, American shells struck their target with precision. Colonel Haru Konuma, intelligence officer of the 17th Army, wrote, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt. We can no longer anticipate their attacks. We are fighting blind." Joe Kieyumia, a Navajo soldier captured at Bataan in April 1942, became Japan's greatest hope of breaking the mysterious code. Though fluent in Navajo, he had no knowledge of the specialized military system being developed. When Japanese cryptographers began intercepting these strange transmissions, Kieyumia was brought to the Auna Interrogation Center. They played recordings of the code talkers. Kieyumia recognized Navajo words, but the combinations were nonsensical. The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird carries eggs. When he could not translate, his captors accused him of lying. The torture escalated systematically for months. Water torture, beatings, suspension by the arms for hours. In the winter of 1943, he was forced to stand naked in the snow until his feet froze to the ground. They starved him until he weighed 90 pounds, offering food in exchange for translations. Yet Kieyumia could only repeat the truth. He understood the words, but not their military meaning. A Japanese intelligence report from May 1943 documented their frustration. The prisoner appears to be a native speaker of the mysterious language but cannot comprehend the messages. Evaluation suggests either extraordinary resistance or that the enemy employs a specialized code within his native language requiring specific training. The second conclusion was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers could not understand the code without training. Kiyomiya survived 3.5 years of captivity. His inability to help convinced Japanese intelligence they were facing something unprecedented. By the end of 1943, Japan largely abandoned attempts to decipher the Navajo transmissions. The success at Guadalcanal led to an immediate expansion. Major General Alexander Vandegrift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable. Their transmissions are faster than any encryption device and absolutely secure." A formal code talker school was established at Camp Pendleton, training new groups every 8 weeks. By the end of the war, between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines had served as code talkers in all 6 Marine divisions. The training was unlike anything in Marine Corps history. Recruits practiced in soundproof booths, while instructors played battlefield noises. They transmitted messages wearing gas masks, running until exhaustion. Thomas Begay, who enlisted at 15, recalled, "They pushed us to the limit. People's lives depended on our accuracy." The code evolved continuously. New technologies required new vocabulary. The atomic bomb became Ayashi, metal egg. Kamikaze pilots were Nuti, wind of death. Each addition made cultural sense to Navajo speakers yet remained incomprehensible to outsiders. By mid-1943, Japanese intelligence dedicated significant resources to cracking the code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 cryptanalysts exclusively to these transmissions. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka tried innovative methods: musical analysis for tonal patterns, comparison with Native American recordings, consultation with American-trained linguists. They built special recording devices to slow transmissions without altering pitch, created oscilloscope visuals of the sound, and applied statistical frequency analysis. Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada later revealed they had identified certain patterns, possible indicators, correlations between message length and operational complexity, but without understanding the words, the data had little value. Japanese field orders began instructing troops to capture Marine radio operators alive. Rewards were offered: 10,000 yen, 10 years' salary, for the equipment or materials of a code operator. Several close calls occurred, but no code talker was ever captured with his gear intact. The Central Pacific Campaign proved the strategic power of the code talkers. At Tarawa, in November 1943, 6 code talkers maintained communication for 76 hours of continuous combat. Lloyd Oliver transmitted for 48 hours straight, coordinating naval fire amid relentless bombardment. During the Marianas Campaign, 24 code talkers operated around the clock on Saipan. Japanese intelligence under Lieutenant Commander Takashi Harukawa, who had previously broken Allied ciphers, found that once the Marines landed, tactical intelligence vanished completely. Colonel Takashi Saito noted bitterly, "Our commanders felt abandoned without the intelligence they had come to rely upon." At Peleliu, code talker Jimmy King transmitted for 6 hours during a counterattack after his partner was killed. He coordinated artillery from 3 battalions, sending 40 error-free messages under direct fire. But it was the Battle of Iwo Jima that marked the code talkers' greatest contribution. Commander Howard Connor, the 5th Marine Division's signal officer, directed the entire initial assault using the Navajo Code. 6 code talkers worked in teams, maintaining continuous communication through the first 48 critical hours of the invasion. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent 2 years preparing the island, building an underground fortress with 11 miles of tunnels. His defensive plan depended on intercepting American communications to time counterattacks. That plan completely collapsed. Within 48 hours, the 6 Navajo operators sent and received over 800 error-free messages coordinating the landing of 30,000 Marines. Naval gunfire from 100 ships, close air support, enemy positions, medical evacuation supply lines, and tactical orders all under constant fire. Major Connor later testified, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." During the first 48 hours, I had 6 Navajo radio networks operating around the clock. They sent and received more than 800 messages, without a single error. The entire operation was directed through Navajo code. Colonel Shigeo Hayashi reported to Kuribayashi that American codes remained indecipherable. Artillery requests that took 20 seconds via Navajo would have required 30 minutes through conventional encryption, a difference between destroying a position or losing it. At Okinawa, 35 code talkers coordinated the largest Pacific assault, 183,000 troops over 82 days. Japanese forces tried to jam signals and mimic voices but could not reproduce Navajo's tonal qualities. Code talker Alfred Newman recalled attempts by Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto to imitate Navajo. It sounded like someone talking with his eyes bulging out, trying to speak a language his tongue couldn't make. On August 14, 1945, code talker Teddy Draper transmitted the war's most meaningful message. Nehema Adi Gini Adanil, Japanese surrender. The message reached command through the Navajos before the conventional channels, a fitting end to the War of the Code Talkers. After the war, American interrogators uncovered the full extent of Japan's efforts and their total failure. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisui, Japan's chief of intelligence, admitted, "We never broke the Marine Corps code. We broke Army, Air Force, and diplomatic codes, but the Marines' tactical code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto confirmed, "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguist studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our greatest cryptographic failure." By 1944, analysts had observed tonal patterns suggesting an American Indian language. They requested German assistance, but wartime difficulties and German ignorance of native languages made cooperation impossible. Colonel Masao Yamada later conceded, "Our inability to read Marine communications cost thousands of lives." After 1942, every Marine operation remained a mystery until it began. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, a survivor of Iwo Jima, described the psychological impact. "We could not understand their words. It made us feel primitive, defeated before the battle even started." The end of the war did not lift the burden carried by the Navajo Code Talkers. The entire program remained classified in case it might be reused during the Cold War. The men returned home unable to tell anyone about their service, not even their families. They came back to states that had denied them the right to vote until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona, and until 1957 in Utah. Hotels and restaurants refused them service. They were heroes who could not reveal their heroism. Chester Nez, the last of the original 29 who passed away in 2014, wrote, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but we couldn't tell anyone. The weight of that secret was heavy. Many found healing through traditional ceremonies. The Enemy Way ceremony purified warriors from the spiritual contamination of battle." Dan Erke explained, "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it to heal. The ceremonies reminded us that our language is sacred." In 1968, the Code Talker program was declassified. The first official recognition came the following year at a 4th Marine Division reunion. President Ronald Reagan proclaimed August 14, 1982, as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. But the most significant acknowledgement arrived on July 26, 2001, when President George W. Bush presented congressional gold medals to the 29 originals in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 of the original Code Talkers lived to attend. Bush declared, Today, we honor 29 Native Americans who rendered a service to their country that only they could have rendered. Chester Nez responded, "We were ordinary men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war. While the Navajos became the most famous, 14 other tribes contributed code talkers. The Choctaw had pioneered the concept during World War I. In World War II, 17 Comanche code talkers served in Europe and landed on D-Day. Others, Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, and more, also used their languages for secure communication. The Code Talkers Recognition Act of 2008 honored all tribes. John Brown, Jr. reflected, "They told us our language was useless. Then they needed it to win the war." The Navajo Code proved the sophistication of Native American languages. The Code Talkers modernized Navajo in real time, creating new grammatical constructions and adapting metaphors for military purposes. Its agglutinative nature allowed complex ideas to be expressed in a single word. What took paragraphs in English could be conveyed in seconds in Navajo. Dr. William Morgan observed, "They demonstrated that indigenous languages are not primitive. They showed that Navajo can express everything, from ceremony to war." The Navajo Code introduced the concept of cultural encryption, security derived not from mathematics, but from linguistic and cultural barriers no machine could penetrate. The idea influenced post-war intelligence operations and remains relevant today, as quantum computing threatens mathematical encryption. Colonel David Hatch summarized, "They achieved something unique, an unbroken, uncompromised code. They proved that human linguistic creativity could surpass mechanical encryption." In the 1980s, Japanese academics began studying their own failure. Professor Teo Yoshikawa revealed that 30 cryptanalysts had worked exclusively on the transmissions for 2 years, consulting multiple universities. Captain Minoru Yamada admitted, "By late 1943, we knew it was an American Indian language, but we couldn't identify which one." Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Fukumoto confessed, "Using their mother tongue was so simple, so elegant, that we never considered it." In the 1990s, Japanese photographer Kenji Kawano documented surviving Navajo Code Talkers. His exhibitions in Tokyo and Hiroshima introduced their story to the Japanese public. Code talker Albert Smith told his Japanese audience, "We were both warriors. My language helped defeat you, but now it helps us understand each other." In 2010, at the Japanese Association for Intelligence Studies Symposium, Admiral Hiroaki Abe stated, "The Navajo Code represents perfect encryption. We had Asia's best cryptographers, and we were completely defeated." On June 4, 2014, Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, passed away. Today, only 2 code talkers remain alive from the nearly 400 who served: Thomas H. Begay and Peter MacDonald, not among the original 29, but vital to the code's operational success. At 96, Peter MacDonald continued to speak publicly. "We proved that America's strength comes from its diversity. Our different languages and cultures make us stronger." The Navajo language, once suppressed, is now recognized as a strategic asset. Federal education funding references the history of the Code Talkers. Native youth study their ancestral tongues with renewed pride. Dr. Jennifer Dennetdale observed, "The Code Talkers transformed how Native Americans saw themselves and how the United States saw them. They showed that our languages are not museum pieces but living resources." The story of the Navajo Code Talkers transcends military history. It stands as a paradox of America itself, where a people once forbidden to speak their own language used it to defend the nation that had tried to erase it. For centuries, U.S. policy sought to suppress native languages. Children in government boarding schools were beaten for speaking them. By the 1930s, many Americans believed these languages were destined to vanish. Yet, within a decade, one of them would become America's most powerful weapon. The irony is profound. A tongue born from oral tradition, older than the United States itself, outwitted the most advanced cryptographic machinery of the 20th century. During the height of World War II, while scientists in Bletchley Park and Berlin struggled to decipher Enigma and Purple, a handful of Navajo Marines, armed only with radios and memory, communicated across the Pacific with perfect security. The Unbreakable Code symbolized something greater than military triumph. It revealed that diversity, long treated as weakness, was in fact a source of strength. Peter MacDonald, in a 2020 speech at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, said, "We used the same language they tried to silence, that, as the American story, the ability to turn what was once rejected into something that protects everyone." Every November 11th, at the Window Rock Veterans Memorial, the Navajo Nation honors its warriors. The names of the 29 original Code Talkers are carved into stone beneath the tribal flag and the Marine Corps emblem. Visitors hear their voices recorded in Dine Bizad, reading messages once transmitted under fire. To hear the language now, broadcast in ceremonies, taught in schools, spoken in prayer, is to understand that the code never truly ended. In the 21st century, military linguists still study the Navajo Code as a model of natural encryption, where meaning is layered, tonal, and culturally bound. The lessons extend beyond war. That knowledge rooted in culture can solve problems technology cannot. The code's endurance reminds America that languages are living intelligence systems. Where the machine fails, human imagination endures. In 2017, the U.S. Marine Corps dedicated the Code Talkers Hall at Camp Pendleton. Inside, a bronze plaque bears a simple inscription. In war, they used their words to defend freedom. In peace, their words remind us who we are. During the ceremony, the remaining Code Talkers stood together, their uniforms heavy with medals. Thomas Begay, then in his 90s, raised his hand and spoke in Navajo. His words translated, "We were told to protect the code with our lives. We did. Now the code protects our story." The language that once carried death orders now carries memory, spoken to grandchildren who learn it not from fear but from pride. In a world obsessed with digital encryption, the Navajo Code endures as a reminder that the most secure communication ever devised by humankind came not from machines, but from culture, community, and identity. And so, when historians trace the origins of modern cryptography between the names of Turing and Zimmermann, there should stand one more: the Navajo Code Talkers, the only warriors in history whose weapon was the word.